Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon by Sarah Hawley. Yeah, another romance book. I picked this up because it's super cute. I like the sound of the title. It was Halloween vibes, like witches and demons. But this was really another just boring book. And yeah, I think with romance for me, like sometimes they can be amazing if you really like connect the characters, or if the author builds tension in a really compelling way, or the spice is amazing or something. But yeah, this just again didn't have any of those. The plot at least was a little bit more interesting, which had like environmental tones to it. But I basically found the main male character, the demon. He kind of gave me the ick. The demon has like accidentally captured someone's soul that he made a bargain with. But then I'm like, but isn't a soul like someone else? So aren't you falling in love with kind of the soul rather than just like the vessel? And then doesn't that mean that the main character is falling in love with like an old warlock, which is who the soul came from? Like, I didn't really get that. I don't think the author explained that very well, so that kind of like fed into my ick factor. But yeah, I didn't really like it at all, and that's why it's down at the bottom of the scale. The next book, number 44, is Fire in the Flesh, which is a romantasy by Jennifer L. Armentrout. And that was it was like the fourth book in a prequel series to the From Blood and Ash romantasy series that was super popular. If you know anything about like romantasy, I'm sure you'll have heard of that one. But yeah, this one, this was the reason why I stopped reading that particular prequel series, because I think it started well, but then the main characters ended up annoying me so much by this point, and in particular the main female character. So in this book I can't really say too much, but like basically the main character kind of is sort of captured by the enemy, and she's supposed to be like doing anything she can to free the person that she's in love with, except she keeps saying that she would like do anything for them, and then she can't like even keep her mouth shut to be like slightly appeasing to the person that has like captured her. I'm like, well, you can't, clearly your claims that you could like do anything for this person is just bullshit, because you're not. You're literally, every chance that you get, you're pissing the person off that's like holding you captive, which is then endangering the life of the person that you love. Like, really annoyed me. The main character just like did my head in, and I think I just got bored by that point in the series, so that's why it's at number 44. And then at 43 we have another of the Rena Kent books, which is God of Malice, which was the first one in the series. The first one in the series. And this is a book that really should be kind of at the bottom of the list because it is so problematic. But like, I at least found some interesting points in this book, even though it was like really pretty dreadful. But to be fair, with these dark romances, it's not like the authors haven't already said like in their little intro all the trigger warnings and like, you know, to be mindful of that. So to a certain extent you can't like complain about that side of it, but description of kissing sounded awful. I was like, have you ever had a good kiss in your life? Because that is not the description of a good kiss. Anyway, so yeah, not very good at all. But it wasn't boring, I'm gonna say that, so that's why it's a little bit higher up. We're now coming to our very first non-romance book, and probably like surprising that this book is so far down the list and very much embedded in the worst books of the year. And I feel bad for saying this, I wish it wasn't the case. But White Teeth by Zadie Smith, which is like a proper modern British classic, and I was pretty excited to read this book, but yeah, really just fell short for me. So this is a kind of multi-generational story set in London, which follows the lives of our main characters, there are about like 6 or something main characters over the course of 2 generations, and it deals with themes of like identity and immigration and belonging and family and things like that. But I just struggled so hard to get through this book. In fact, it basically put me in a reading slump that lasted for quite a while. I just didn't really get on with the kind of pace of it. I found some of the characters really like not that likable. Like one of the 2 main older guys, I can't remember what their names were, but I found him just like quite dreary and boring. I think his name was Archie, maybe. And yeah, some of the scenes, I think it's like 100 pages in, roughly, which I actually tried to read it, gave up at that point, and then when I reread it this time, I struggled at that point again, because it's like a flashback to them in the war, but it's not even like, there's like really not like any action to it. They're just kind of sat in a tank like moaning about stuff, and I don't know, I just didn't connect with it, and I really wanted to. I did find the like younger second generation a little bit more interesting, but even that at times I just felt like it was like I was dragging myself through it to the end, so really a shame. And for sure this was the most disappointing book of the year. Like I had really high expectations, which probably doesn't help with how I feel about it, because obviously when your expectation is so disassociated with like the reality of it, makes it even worse. So I feel bad, but it's down there at number 42. We're back to romance with number 41, with The Goal by Elle Kennedy, which is the 4th in the Off-Campus series, which I read the other books last year. They're all kind of sort of standalone, so you don't really need to like remember what happened in the other books too much, or you could read them out of order. And this is a romance between like a hockey player and then a girl who sort of comes from a bit of a bad background, who has to like work hundreds of jobs to like make ends meet, but is super focused on her studies, and then they like hook up and she ends up getting pregnant, so it's like a pregnancy trope romance. And I did really enjoy some of the earlier books in this series, but again this one I just found it kind of dull. Like I wasn't that bothered about the characters, like neither of them like really like got me like excited in any way, so I just found it like fine. Like there wasn't really anything offensive about it, so nothing too much to write home about on or something. That's fine, that's enough detail. I don't need to know like all the accessories and stuff. So yeah, people have said this is like Gossip Girl, and I can see the similarities a bit, but these characters, I don't know whether it's just like because I'm a lot older than I was when I watched Gossip Girl, but they just kind of got on my nerves. They were very self-centered, and it was one of those cases where like everyone seems to be in love with the main character, Magnolia Parks, and I can't understand why, other than the fact that, you know, she's described as being really good looking. Like, personality wise, I felt she was kind of like vapid, like there wasn't much to her. So I don't understand why supposedly loads of people are in love with her. One thing I will give due to on this book and the author though, there was a bit of a surprise towards the end that I wasn't really expecting. So I can sort of see why people might be intrigued by that and want to go and read more, but sadly this didn't really do it for me. But I have to admit, like, I'm still a little bit tempted to try the next book, because I do, it's so, talking about vapid characters, it's so like superficial of me, but I just love the look of these books. So part of me is tempted to try and see what the next one is like. But yeah, that was book number 40, I think. Okay, next we have a whole load of Kindle books to talk through. I'm gonna go quite quickly, hopefully. But yeah, 39 and 38 are Broken Prince and Paper Princess by Erin Watt. These are romance, and they're not really dark, but there's like a bit of like bully romance element to the first one. And the setup is, I can't really remember it entirely, but like there's a girl who, I think she's like orphaned, she's like 17 or 18 or something, and she ends up going to live with this family through some like connection. They're not like actually related, but she goes to live with this guy and his like 5 sons, and then obviously like she ends up getting with one of them. So that's basically it, but there's some like family drama peppered in there. It was fine, like I enjoyed it enough to have read 2 in the series, but it just didn't like keep my interest that much. I think the spice was okay, but it wasn't that memorable, to be honest. And with these kind of books, you do get those annoying like miscommunication things sometimes, where like if everyone just sat down and talked to each other, everything would be fine and there wouldn't even be a drama. But yeah, that doesn't happen, so they were alright. I didn't hate them, but I certainly didn't love them either. And then I have three books from the From Blood and Ash universe. So number 35 was The Crown of Gilded Bones. Number 36 was The War of Two Queens, and I think they're like very late on in the main series. And then 37, A Soul of Ash and Blood. I don't know whether that might be the prequel or not. Problem with these books is, especially when they all have such similar titles, I can't remember what happens in each individual one, but I just know that the later books in the series, which is what these are, they just like got a bit less I don't know, impactful to me. I certainly, because they're so long, I kind of lost interest a little bit compared to the earlier books in the series, so that's why they're down here. Nothing too much to write home about, but they were good enough, just good enough to keep me reading. On to book 34, which I think I need to speed up, which is stupid because I should really pay more attention to the better books, but this is From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Doherty, or Doty. This is a non-fiction book, and it is about different burial cultures around the world, which is so completely random. And I actually, when I picked this up, thought it was going to be more about like death culture in general and like the idea of afterlife, but this really focused in on like literal practical logistics of what you do with romance than your typical romantasy. This could almost just be like a straight fantasy book. And this is about, like, you know, good versus evil. There's this like evil being person who kind of steals children and gets them to like do her bidding, and then there's a family where they have like this deal with her and they like end up trying to break it, basically, kind of thing. It was fine, it was alright, just didn't really like grab my attention. Also in this book, I really couldn't believe how badly like the publisher had screwed up, but like in chapter like 15, 16, 17, instead of the chapters that were supposed to be there, it was like chapter 40, 45, 50. So it was a complete mess. I ended up having to go on Spotify and listening to the audiobook for those few chapters and then coming back to the book, so that kind of probably impacted my enjoyment a little bit of it, but it was alright. It was kind of a different idea, but just like fairly surface level interest. Then next up we have another Kindle book. This was Agatha Christie's Five Little Pigs, which was a cute, I don't know if I should use the word cute when it involves murder, but yeah, like cozy murder mystery, basically, like, you know, the deal. Agatha Christie, Hercule Poirot comes and solves a case of a painter who was killed, and there's like loads of different suspects who it could have been. So yeah, it was fine, it was fun, it was enjoyable, but again, like with this kind of section of books, I think it's the kind of books that were like inoffensive, fine to read, no issues, maybe like a kind of 6 out of 10, 5 or 6 out of 10, but they just didn't hook me in any real way. So yeah, Agatha Christie, I wouldn't be adverse to reading more of her stuff. And then possibly another shock, but the next book is Dark Places by Gillian Flynn. I loved Gone Girl. I loved Gone Girl, but this book I did struggle with a bit. It's the story of a girl whose family were murdered and her brother is in prison for the murders, and it's basically about her as an adult kind of reliving that trauma, trying to unpick what happened, because there's some kind of conspiracy theories about whether or not her brother was actually the true murderer. And you know, this was actually a decent enough book. Like, I think, you know, if you've read any of her work, you have to say she's like pretty good at putting a story together, decent enough characterization, and you know, good writing. I just struggled with the themes of this book a bit. I think maybe it was when I was in my reading slump phase, and I think I just wasn't in like the best headspace anyway, so to be hearing about this night where these murders happened of children, and quite like gruesome stuff, I really struggled actually, and I had to stop reading it, and then I came back to it like months later, which is why for me, like, this is probably in theory better than some of the other books that are ahead of it, but in terms of my enjoyment of this book as a whole, like, I really didn't like it, to be honest. You know, really dark just natural. And then someone else gets found dead, and there ends up being like an investigation into it, and the lady and one of her neighbours, and they're kind of trying to figure out what's happened and unravel the plot. And there's a lot of stuff and themes about like nature and solitude in this book, and overall I thought it was quite good. Definitely kind of like a more literary and like lots to think about. I really liked the characterizations. I thought they were like quite quirky, but still like had a lot of like believability to them, and it was quite sad as well at times. So yeah, this was a pretty good read. It just wasn't like a top read. Almost similarly to the next book, which is All the Lovers in the Night by Miko Kawakami. So this is a very like slow-paced book where in some ways not like a whole lot happens, but it basically just follows this girl who is a proofreader, and she's just very troubled, very, again, like the solitude, similar vibes in a way to the last book, but yeah, she's a very lonely person, has very little connection with other people, and it's kind of her story about how she meets this one person, and the kind of how that like opens up her feelings about her past and some things that have happened in her past and her relationship to other people, and it's like really interesting in that sense, like exploration of trauma and friendships, and loneliness, and it was kind of very beautiful, quite like I would describe it as like a quiet, beautiful book, but very slow in some ways, and I think I would maybe have enjoyed this if I'd read it at a different time, because I'd basically picked this up in my reading slump, and it probably wasn't the right book to be reading at that time. I did still enjoy it, but I think I would maybe have enjoyed it more at a different point. But yeah, quite a beautiful, sad, I would say, like melancholy book. Okay, so that was book 27. We are now on to book 26, which is A Light in the Flame by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which was like the second spin-off from Blood and Ash, which I did enjoy quite a lot. Like that story still had like the beginning excitement to it in that book, and now a couple of books which I do still own the physical copies, but they've packed them away with my Christmas stuff because I kind of had them out on display, but they are kind of very similar. I'll talk about them together, but I basically bought them because they looked pretty, which is bad, but they're super cute. So the first one is Winter's Song by Angela Harding, and this is just like a kind of illustrated book with this she's a printmaker, so an artist, but she's like created think, you know, it's so inventive. It's quite creepy. I like some of the characters and the settings, so yeah, it's still a worthwhile good read. I'm gonna do the next 3 books together because they're in the same series, and they are all by Michael McDowell, and they are The Flood, The Levy, and The House, and they're in the Blackwater series of books, which I also want to finish this year. And I mean, they are absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous editions. And these are all set in a southern town in America, like in, I don't know, 1800s or something. And it just follows a family that lives there. And there's, in the first book, there's a big flood, and this kind of river monster basically invades town and kind of ingratiates itself into the town, and it just follows the story of what happens after that. It's kind of a bit soap opera-y, super easy to read, and then you just occasionally get these flashes of like actual horror and death and stuff, so it's kind of an interesting mixture. I liked The House the most. I think that one started to feel like it was really building creepiness and tension, but yeah, they're like kind of just sort of fun, a little bit dramatic, cheesy horror reads basically. Next up, we're on to Shrines of Gaiety by Kate Atkinson. This was a really fun kind of 1930s London mafia family, following their story basically, and a couple of other characters as a policewoman, and then just some other random lady who kind of get embroiled in the goings on of this like mafia clan basically. I mean, it wouldn't be the mafia because it's London, but you know, basically just gangs, that kind of vibe. It was really fun. I loved the setting. I loved the kind of like slightly, not madcap, but like some of the stuff that these characters get themselves into. It's kind of fun, and I really enjoyed in particular some of the characters because there's quite a few people that we follow in this. I kind of think it could have been elevated, for me at least, if we'd had a bit more detail on some of the characters, because it's a big-ish book, but I think given like the scope of it, we could have had a lot more like focus in on a few people rather than trying to cover everyone. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a real fun time read. Next up is another Christmas book that I don't have with me, but I read The Nutcracker by E.T.A. Hoffman, which is the original Nutcracker story, not the retelling. And I really enjoyed this. It was a really lovely, childish story, but it kind of brought the imagination to light. And yeah, it's basically about a little girl that gets given a nutcracker as a gift, and then he kind of comes to life at night, and there's like battles with like a mouse king, and like trying to save the kingdom basically, and unravel the story of who Nutcracker is. So yeah, it was just like a really good, fun, inspiring, kind of childhood vibe story. So yeah, really did enjoy that one quite a lot more than I maybe expected. Another rare non-fiction next, and that is Seven Deadly Sins by Guy Leschziner. This is a book kind of about psychology and neurology, and yeah, so biology and brain chemistry, kind of what happens when the brain kind of goes a bit wrong, and we end up with the extreme behaviours of like the 7 deadly sins. So this takes each sin in turn and talks about like different case studies of like that behaviour in the extreme and how like damaging it can be, and it's like peppered throughout with loads of like case studies and different psychological studies and like brain diagrams and things like that. So yeah, it was quite interesting. There were certain chapters was saying like we have any control over what we do, or you know, what was the kind of message behind it all. But it's quite high up because it was super interesting at times, like really you know, had me turning, like real page turner for a non-fiction book is very unusual for me. I believe we're on to the 12th book now, and that is Love in a Cold Climate by Nancy Mitford. This is like kind of a historical romance slash kind of social commentary kind of book, kind of a similar vibe to like a Jane Austen, except this is like set in a different period. But yeah, just really enjoyable. I liked hearing about the characters. They were all quite quirky, and there were some like very funny, entertaining moments. But yeah, it basically follows the lives of the main character, and then yeah, like people getting married and all the kind of dramas and stuff that happen along with that. But yeah, it was just a really good time read, like fond feeling about this book. Next up is The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle, which was a really good read. This is a story of a kind of curse, a supposed curse that relates to a family who have a big house on Dartmoor in like southwest England, and Sherlock, well, mainly Dr. Watson actually has to go there and investigate because all the like ancestors have been killed off, and there's this like American, I think he's American, like the last one in the line basically comes, and they're worried that he's gonna be killed as well. So it's like set up on the moorlands, very like wild landscape, and yeah, lots of intrigue and mystery. I do love a Sherlock Holmes in terms of like how he unpicks and unravels the mystery and the problem, what's going on. So yeah, similar to all of the other books with Sherlock Holmes, it's one of the longer ones, I believe. So there is a lot of like meat to it, but yeah, just a really interesting, cool setting as well. We're continuing on with Grady Hendrix's The Final Girl Support Group. This was a fun read in the style of kind of like typical style of Grady Hendrix, which I think is like cheesy horror-ish thrillers. And this basically is an interesting premise where there's a group of final girls, which is in your like typical horror slasher teen movies. There's always a girl left at the end, like the only survivor, and it follows a group of those, and in particular the main character Lynette, as they start being killed and someone is kind of stalking them, and it follows her trying to unravel it all and not die again, basically. So yeah, it was quite a fun premise, like different. The problem I had with this book was the main character was really quite annoying. I don't know whether that was intentional or not, but that kind of hurt I didn't really warm to her, and that really sort of was a bit problematic in terms of my overall enjoyment of the book. I also think that what ended up happening, half of it was, I think, semi-predictable. There was a little bit that maybe was a twist, but it wasn't super surprising what happened. But still, a fun time read. And then coming in at 13, 12 and 11, these are my top ranked romantasy. A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, A Shadow in the Ember, and From Blood and Ash itself. So these three books, two of them are the first two books in the main series, and then the one of them is the first book in the prequel series. I really loved how this series started. I really enjoyed the characters and the tension and the way that the story was unfolding in the opening books. Alice and Marilyn by Sophie Elmhurst. And this is the story, the true story, of a man and woman who are sailing around the world, and their ship gets sunk by a whale, and they end up cast adrift at sea for about 3 months, I think, in the end, like a crazy amount of time. They're obviously horribly messed up by the time that they do end up getting rescued. But I do love a really good survival story, and you know, this is obviously it. You can't get much more of a survival story than spending 3 months adrift at sea, just two of you. So yeah, just really interesting. I liked the way that the author told the story, and like really like depicted the characters of the two people, and how like they each had their like strengths and weaknesses, and how they kind of supported each other to come together to get through it. And then the kind of tale of how they survived when they get rescued was like pretty emotional, and crazy. I think it tailed off a bit at the end of the book. Like there is like a decent section after they get rescued about like all the press side of it and like the impacts, the like lasting impacts. But yeah, it's just an absolutely crazy story of survival, and I really enjoyed reading it. Book number 8 is Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. So this is a proper classic, talking about Humbert, our antagonist, who's basically like a predator of a young girl who's in his care, and it's kind of his story and his kind of unravelling and then like kind of realisation essentially of what he's done. But yeah, it's a really incredibly well written, beautifully written book, and it really like took me on a journey that I never expected in terms of the emotions. Like I think there were times when it was like even like a little bit humorous, obviously not that kind of side of it, but yeah, it really kind of like took you through like a lot of different emotions. It was pretty tense at times, a really like cleverly put together story, and I actually really enjoyed it, surprisingly. So yeah, that's number 8. Number 7 is The Sandcastle by Iris Murdoch, who I'm looking forward to maybe reading some more of, because this is the second book of hers that I really enjoyed. So yeah, this is kind of getting into the like 9, like I'd say we're in the like 9 out of 10 territory right now. This is the tale of an English school teacher who works at a boarding school. But basically he has a family, a wife and 2 children, and then he kind of has this like midlife crisis essentially, and there's this younger woman that comes to the school to paint a portrait of an old headmaster, and they kind of end up having this affair, and then everything just like spirals out of control. This is definitely a book where the way that the characters are drawn and described and come to life on the pages is incredible, and it's kind of like a bit of a farce, like silly things happening and like things unraveling and spiraling out of control, and it definitely feels like it's one of those kind of social commentary books as well. But yeah, just a really enjoyable adventure. You know, the ups and downs in terms of the emotions because of the nature of what's going on. At times you definitely kind of have your head in your hands being like, what are you doing? Why are you making these stupid decisions? But I don't know, she does a really good job of painting these kind of eccentric, flawed, but still sort of likeable characters that you're super invested in finding out what happens along the way, these kind of crazy stories. So yeah, just really enjoyable read. Book number 6 is another Kindle book, and absolutely surprisingly this is God of Fury by Rena Kent, which is in the series where like basically 2 of the worst books of the year were in this same series. But for some reason I just absolutely loved this one, out of the three that I read, the other two I kind of hated. This one I loved. And this is sort of a dark romance in a way. It's like set in that same college mafia-ish world, with this group of like unhinged psychopathic men, basically. The two main characters, it's gay romance. So one of the guys is in this like psychopath group, and I thought I wasn't gonna like him based on how he was in one of the other books, really. But he ended up being like super likable. Weirdly, he was kind of like a golden retriever puppy, but also like a bit violent in terms of like other people, but you don't really see that in the book. So he had like kind of like boundless positive energy and was like the instigator of the romance. And then the other guy was kind of like stressed, insecure, kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, a bit more like neurotic, like inward, who was like fighting his feelings kind of vibe. And I just really loved their romance and how it all came together. Like one of them was like super reluctant at first, the one that was like in his own head all the time. Yeah, I loved the spice, I loved all of it. Obviously like potentially some like slightly problematic bits, like, but in terms of like consent, it wasn't anywhere near as bad as the other, well, in particular the very first one in the series. But yeah, I think this book also had a bit of another interesting subplot, which the other two were lacking, and this was about kind of trauma that had happened in the past to one of the characters, and the way that was like manifesting itself. And I felt like that was like quite real, and I think that was actually a really good exploration of like mental health and trauma. So yeah, I actually just really, really, really enjoyed this. Definitely the best romance book I read in the year. Actually ticked all the boxes, so really happy that I did actually read that one. Book number 5 is One Dark Window. One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. So this is a kind of I was gonna say dark fantasy. It's not dark in the sense of like, you know, loads of really difficult subjects and deaths and stuff, but like the whole like mood and atmosphere of the book is just like kind of grim and dark. Basically we're in like a mist-bound world, where there's like a really interesting magic system that the main characters like kind of caught up in. There's like some rebellion and intrigue and a little bit of romance peppered in, and overall I just thought it was really well written, really captivating. I loved the characters. Our main female character kind of has this like issue where she has like this kind of like monster in her head that kind of does a lot of talking and stuff throughout, and that was a really interesting kind of plot point and technique. And like I said, I really loved the magic system, which is kind of built around like these almost kind of tarot card vibes, where the owner of the card can use its unique kind of properties in order to have magic for a certain amount of time, and that's just kind of unique magic system. So overall I really, really loved it. This was a 5-star read. So we are officially into our 5-star reads now, the 10 out of 10 books. I think this one though, because it sort of ended on a bit of a cliffhanger, and there's one more book to complete this duology, so my feelings about it I think will be a little bit predicated on how I feel about that book. If it's sort of a letdown, then this will probably go down in my esteem as well. Book number 4 is The Burnings by Naomi Kelsey. The Burnings, The Burnings, The Burnings. This is an incredible kind of epic tale that takes in basically. So this kind of fear builds throughout the book. But yeah, it's an amazing novel. I don't normally love kind of historically set books, but this was so well written and so compelling. It really had you like torn in a way, because it felt like there were characters on like both sides, both sides of the story, let's say. And I was like really worried because I didn't know how they were both gonna survive, our main characters. And yeah, I was just so invested. But it was brilliantly written. Really, some difficult moments in it as well. And there was one moment that completely unexpectedly had me just like burst out crying. I didn't expect, there wasn't like a build up to it where I was like, oh, this is getting bad now. It was just like one thing a character said in a certain moment, and it really was like super profound and beautiful and heartbreaking, and it basically just made me cry almost out of nowhere. So that was the kind of level of writing and the way that it could affect you, but just a fantastic exploration of womanhood, as well as kind of political intrigue. But yeah, it's hard to do a proper like synopsis in a short space of time, but I'll leave it there. I do highly recommend this book if it sounds at all interesting to you. We are down to our top 3, and this third book is The Fall by Simon Mauer. This is a kind of another sweeping book that follows a couple of people's lives. This is the story of Rob and Jamie, who are childhood friends who love climbing, and they kind of grew up together, like in and out of each other's lives. But then there's like at the beginning of the book, you find out there's been an accident where one of them is killed, and it basically kind of goes back and tells their story of how their lives intersect over many years, and then also how their parents' lives intersect as well. So it's basically like an amazingly beautiful tale of like messy relationships and friendships and family dynamics, and just an amazing like human story. And that's like the main kind of like thing that makes it so good. I did love like the backdrop of climbing and just the general way that this story was told, and again it was kind of a bit heartbreaking. There were more tears shed in this book as well. So yeah, just a fantastic story. If you enjoy those kind of books that just kind of take a couple of people and follow their lives, the kind of twists and turns along the course of people's lives with messy relationships involved, then yeah, this is a good book to read. The second to last book is The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. This is very, very different. This does barely have any characters in it, just one main character, and then a person that you never really see, you just hear them coming through a microphone. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this. This is set in a cave system in another world, where our main character has to go down into this very dark, dangerous, treacherous, massive cave system over the journey of quite a few days that she's there, in order to explore and map out the cave system. And there are like many perils along the way, like natural elements of the cave system and the environment I found it super, super creepy, building up tension, like what's gonna happen, and the way that it kind of unraveled the plot and the story. And I just thought it was a really, really fantastic, fun, interesting, couldn't put it down kind of read, and I loved it, and it's absolutely stayed in my head since I read it almost a year ago now. So that is just in number 2. It could have been in number 1, but that spot is reserved for, and you will know if you've seen me talk about this book, but Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. It is the kind of perspective from Jon Krakauer, the kind of true life events of the 1996 Everest disaster, where quite a few people lost their lives when they were trying to summit Mount Everest. And this is a really amazingly written explanation of the build up to it, the build up to the sequence of events, like of what happened on the mountain, and it really takes you like step by step of all the things that went wrong, all the things that happened, all the different people that were there, and it's just an incredible story. And obviously it's tragic because there are people that didn't make it back, so it